What happens when you find your brother after 32 years and face him in the Dr. Phil studio? The camera captured the exact moment when Dr. Phil raised his hand and said, "Stop the tape." His voice cracked. The entire studio fell silent. In his hand, he held a sealed DNA envelope. On stage, two men stood frozen, staring at each other, not yet knowing they were brothers. What happened next would break everyone in that room, including Dr. Phil himself. 6 weeks earlier, Michael Davis, 44, had contacted the Dr. Phil show with a desperate story. He'd been searching for his younger brother, David, for 3 decades. They'd been separated when Michael was 12 and David was only 8 years old, placed in different foster homes after their mother lost custody. "I promised him I'd come back," Michael told the producer during his pre-interview, his voice shaking. "I was just a kid, but I promised. And I never stopped looking." The production team began their investigation. What they found was David Anderson, same birth date, similar facial features, living just 200 miles away in Dallas. But there was a problem. David had no memory of having a brother. His foster family had told him he was an only child. But Dr. Phil's team had ordered a DNA test. And the results were sitting in that envelope. The show was structured as a Finding Family episode. Michael was told he'd be sharing his story on air, hoping someone watching might recognize his brother. David was invited separately, under the premise of discussing his own adoption trauma, completely unaware of the setup. Michael arrived first. He sat in the green room, hands trembling, staring at an old, faded photograph, the only picture he had of David as a child. The edges were worn from years of handling. "If he's here," Michael whispered to the producer. "If he's really here today, I don't know if I can handle it." The producer squeezed his shoulder. "Dr. Phil knows what he's doing. Trust the process." David arrived 20 minutes later, escorted to a separate holding area. He had no idea his brother was in the building. No idea his entire life was about to change. The taping began like any other Dr. Phil episode. But nothing about this day would be ordinary. Dr. Phil walked onto the stage to thunderous applause. The audience settled. He held up the photograph Michael had brought, the one of 2 young boys, arms wrapped around each other, smiling at a birthday party in 1992. "Today's show is about a promise," Dr. Phil began, his voice carrying that distinctive Texas authority. "A promise a 12-year-old boy made to his 8-year-old brother the last time he saw him. Michael, come on out." Michael walked onto the stage, visibly shaking. He sat down across from Dr. Phil, and the audience could see the pain etched into every line of his face. "Tell us about that day," Dr. Phil said gently. Michael's voice broke immediately. "They came to take us. 2 different cars. David was crying, holding onto my shirt. I told him, I'll find you. I promise. I'll come back for you. But I was just a kid. I couldn't keep that promise." The audience was already reaching for tissues. But they had no idea what was coming. Dr. Phil leaned forward. "Michael, you've spent 32 years looking for David. You've hired private investigators, posted on every social media platform, never given up. Why?" "Because he's my brother," Michael said simply. "And I made a promise." Dr. Phil nodded slowly. Then he turned to the camera with an expression the audience had rarely seen, complete seriousness, no hint of his usual directness. "What if I told you," Dr. Phil said carefully, "that we might have found him?" Michael's head snapped up. His eyes widened. "What?" "I said we might have found him. We invited someone to the show today. Someone who matches the age, the birth records, the physical description. Someone who was adopted from the same county in 1992. Michael stood up, his legs barely holding him. "Is he here? Is David here?" Dr. Phil raised his hand. "Hold on. Stop the tape." The cameras kept rolling, but the stage managers froze. The audience went completely silent. This wasn't scripted. Dr. Phil had just broken protocol. "Michael, sit down for a second," Dr. Phil said, his voice softer than the audience had ever heard. Before we do this, I need you to understand something. The man we invited here today has no memory of having a brother. His adoptive family told him he was an only child. He doesn't know why he's here. He doesn't know you're here. Michael's face crumpled. He doesn't remember me? He was 8 years old. Trauma does things to memory, especially in children. But Michael, Dr. Phil pulled out the sealed envelope. We did a DNA test. These results will tell us definitively if he's your brother. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. The envelope sat on the table between them, unopened. Michael stared at it like it might explode. Before we open this, Dr. Phil continued, before we bring him out, I need to know, are you ready? Because if those results are positive, everything changes in the next 5 minutes. For both of you. Michael wiped his eyes. I've been ready for 32 years. Dr. Phil nodded. He stood up and walked to the side of the stage where the producers were standing. The audience watched, confused, as Dr. Phil had a whispered conversation off microphone. Then he returned. Bring him out, Dr. Phil said to the stage manager. But don't tell him anything yet. The audience held its breath. The side door opened. David Anderson walked onto the stage, clearly confused about why he was being brought out during someone else's segment. He was tall, with the same dark eyes as Michael. The same nose. The same way of tilting his head when confused. Michael saw him and gasped. It was a sound that came from somewhere so deep, so primal, that everyone in the studio felt it. Oh my God! Michael whispered. That's him. That's David. David stood near the door, looking between Dr. Phil and the stranger on stage who was staring at him with tears streaming down his face. David, come sit down, Dr. Phil said gently. I need to tell you something. David sat slowly, his eyes never leaving Michael. Do I know you? Michael couldn't speak. He just shook his head, tears pouring down his face. Dr. Phil sat between them. David, what I'm about to tell you is going to sound impossible. But I need you to listen very carefully. He paused. This man's name is Michael Davis. He's been searching for someone for 32 years. He's been searching for his younger brother, who was separated from him in 1992 when they were placed in foster care. David's face went pale. I was placed in foster care in 1992. We know, Dr. Phil said quietly. David, Michael believes you're his brother. The studio went so silent you could hear the cameras humming. David looked at Michael. Really looked at him for the first time. I don't remember having a brother. You were 8, Michael said, his voice breaking. You were 8 years old, and you were wearing a Superman shirt, and you wouldn't let go of my hand. Something flickered across David's face. A flash of something, memory, recognition, something buried deep. I had a Superman shirt, David whispered. It was my favorite. But I don't remember. You called me Mikey. Michael continued, the words tumbling out. Everyone else called me Michael, but you called me Mikey. And you had this thing where you'd pull on my sleeve when you were scared. David's hand moved unconsciously to his side, and the audience noticed. He was pulling on his own sleeve. The same gesture Michael had just described. Dr. Phil saw it too. And he knew it was time. Gentlemen, Dr. Phil said, picking up the envelope. We have the DNA results right here. Before I open this, I want both of you to know. Whatever this says, it doesn't change the fact that both of you have survived incredible trauma. Both of you are here, looking for answers. Are you ready? Michael nodded. David nodded, his hands shaking. Dr. Phil opened the envelope. He read the results silently. His expression changed. Those who knew him well would later say they'd never seen that look on his face before. He looked up at both men. The DNA test shows a 99.9% probability that you are full biological brothers. And that's when everything broke. Michael stood up so fast his chair fell backward. David stood at the same moment. They stared at each other for what felt like an eternity, maybe 3 seconds, maybe forever. "Mikey?" David whispered. "Davy." Michael sobbed. "It's me. I came back. I told you I'd come back." They crashed into each other in an embrace so powerful, so complete, that the entire audience stood up. The sound of crying filled the studio, not just the brothers, not just the audience, but the camera operators, the stage managers, the producers in the booth. And Dr. Phil, for only the 3rd time in his 25-year career, broke down and cried. He stood there, watching these two men hold each other, making up for 32 years of lost time in a single hug. The cameras captured everything, Michael's hands gripping the back of David's shirt, David's entire body shaking with sobs, both of them saying, "I'm sorry," over and over to each other for things that were never their fault. Dr. Phil walked over and put his hands on both their shoulders. "You kept your promise, Michael. You came back for him." Michael couldn't speak. He just held his brother tighter. The show went to commercial break, but the cameras kept rolling behind the scenes. What they captured was Dr. Phil, this man who'd counseled thousands, who'd maintained professional distance through the most difficult cases, standing with his hand over his mouth, tears streaming down his face, watching the reunion he'd orchestrated. "That's what we do this for," he said to his producer, his voice raw. "That right there. That's why we do this show." When they came back from commercial, something unprecedented happened. Dr. Phil didn't return to his chair. He stayed standing with the brothers, who were now sitting together, still holding hands like they were afraid to let go. "I want everyone watching at home to understand what you just witnessed," Dr. Phil said, speaking directly to the camera. "These two men lost their childhood. They lost 32 years. But they never lost hope. Michael never stopped looking. And David," he turned to David. "David, somewhere in your heart, you never forgot either." David was staring at Michael like he was seeing a ghost. "I had dreams," he said quietly. "For years I had dreams about a boy calling me Davy. I thought I was making it up." "You weren't making it up," Michael said, gripping his hand tighter. "I was real. I've always been real." Dr. Phil had to stop the show again. This time, to compose himself. "Off camera," Dr. Phil said, turning to the producers. "I want you to bring their files. Every document we found. Birth certificates, foster records, everything." He looked at the brothers. "You two deserve to know your whole story." The production team scrambled. Within minutes, they brought out folders containing decades of documents. Dr. Phil sat down with both brothers and began walking them through their history, where they were born, why they were separated, what happened to their biological mother, how the system had failed them. The audience watched in stunned silence as Dr. Phil did something he rarely did. He abandoned the show format completely, and just became a human being helping two other human beings piece together their broken past. "Your mother didn't abandon you because she didn't love you," Dr. Phil explained gently. "She was 19 years old, struggling with addiction, and the state intervened. She tried to get you back. According to these records, she tried for 3 years before she..." He paused, checking a document. "Before she died in 1997. Both brothers broke down again. They'd never known what happened to their mother. What Dr. Phil did next is something no one in the room, or watching at home, saw coming. He stood up, walked off stage, and came back carrying a small box. When our team located David, we also found something else. Your mother left this with David's foster family before she died. They were supposed to give it to him when he turned 18, but..." He paused. Communication broke down, and it got lost in storage. He handed the box to David. "This is from your mother." With shaking hands, David opened it. Inside was a letter and 2 small bracelets, child-sized, worn and faded. Michael gasped. "I remember those. She made them for us. She said they'd keep us connected even if we were apart." David pulled out the letter. His voice shook as he read it aloud. "My sweet boys, Michael and David. If you're reading this, then I failed to bring you back together. I'm so sorry. I tried so hard. Please know that I loved you both more than life itself. Michael, take care of your brother. David, never forget you have a brother who loves you. You two only have each other now. Find each other. Please find each other. Love, Mom. The studio erupted in tears. Not polite crying, but deep, cathartic sobbing from everyone present. Dr. Phil sat down heavily, not even trying to hide his own tears anymore. She knew, he said quietly. She knew what mattered most. Michael took one bracelet and put it on his wrist. It didn't fit, he was a grown man now, but he forced it on anyway. David did the same. They held up their wrists together, these two grown men wearing tiny, faded bracelets their mother had made 3 decades ago. We found each other, Mom. Michael whispered. We kept the promise. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. Dr. Phil stood up and addressed the audience one final time. I've been doing this show for 25 years. I've seen thousands of families, thousands of stories. But I will remember this day for the rest of my life. His voice caught. These two men lost their childhood, but they got their brotherhood back. And that, he had to stop and compose himself. That's everything. The show ended with the brothers still on stage, still holding each other, still wearing their mother's bracelets. Dr. Phil arranged for them to have access to therapy, family counseling, and support services. He personally connected them with a genealogist to help them discover more about their family history. The impact extended far beyond that day. The episode became the most watched in Dr. Phil's history, sparking national conversation about foster care reform. Legislators in 3 states cited it when proposing laws to keep siblings together. 6 months later, Michael and David returned for a follow-up. They'd moved to the same city and had dinner together every Sunday. Dr. Phil gave us back our family, Michael said. Our history. Ourselves. The bracelets still sit on both their wrists. They've never taken them off. That's the power of family. That's why Dr. Phil broke down, because he witnessed proof that some bonds can never truly be broken, no matter how hard the world tries to sever them. The reunion reminded everyone watching that someone is still looking for you. Someone still remembers. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you get to find them again.